I strongly believe we should be having a much bigger debate about defence, about our alliances, and indeed about our own military capability. And it was important, I thought, when I went to see Donald Trump last week in Mar-a-Lago, that he made it perfectly clear where he stands on American leadership of NATO.
Yeah, but the United States should pay its fair share, not everybody else's fair share.
No, fair enough.
I believe the United States was paying 90% of NATO, the cost of NATO. It could be 100%. It was the most unfair thing. And don't forget, it's more important to them than it is to us. We have an ocean in between some problems, okay? We have a nice, big, beautiful ocean. And it's more important for them. They were taking advantage, and they did. They took advantage of us on trade, and they took advantage on
So if they play fair, if they start to play fair, America's there.
Yes, 100%.
Well, I'm joined down the line by the former Chief of General Staff, Lord Richard Dannatt. And Lord Dannatt, I mean, that was an important point that Trump made, wasn't it? Provided we all pay the bill, America is there. I mean, NATO is still very much, is it not, at the centre of our defensive strategy?
Yes to all that, Nigel. I mean, NATO is undoubtedly at the centre and the heart of our defence strategy. It's our single most significant defensive alliance. And I think particularly since Brexit, it's really important that the UK shows itself to be a strong European partner within NATO and play our part in European collective defence. That's really important. But Donald Trump, for all his bluster and his colourful language, makes a very fair point. All the European NATO members must pay their way. And there's a lot of talk about 2% is the figure. Well, that's the minimum. That's the baseline. Countries like ourselves should, and we'll come on to this, I'm sure, should be paying more than we are to be a significant player in deterring future aggression from Russia. And that's the secret to this. It's all about deterring future aggression, not limbering up to fight another bloody and disastrous war.
Yeah, which a lot of people don't understand when this subject is raised. And it's important to discuss this. I mean, Lieutenant General Sir Rob McGowan, Deputy Chief of Defence Staff, was questioned by Conservative Member of Parliament Mark Francois. And basically, he confirmed Francois' worst fears, that in a fighting, shooting war with Russia, we'd be done within 2 months.
Well, I mean, that's exactly the point. Now, that's a situation that's exacerbated by the fact that we have given a lot of our weapons and our munitions and ammunition and missiles to Ukraine, because Ukraine effectively is holding the ring at the present moment and actually buying us time. But buying us time for what? Actually buying us time to properly debate and think through what our proper level of defence spending should be. We're currently on about 2.2% in this country, but there's a growing clamour to go to 2.5% on its way to 3%. And personally, I think that's absolutely right. And if I could just make one point, a lot of parallels are being made with the 1930s. Just think back to the 1930s. There was a dictator showing aggression in Europe. We chose to appease him. We chose not to rearm. Now, in 1935, we were spending less than 3% of GDP on defence. When the war broke out, appeasement having failed, that shot up to 18%. And in 1940, when we were fighting for our lives, it was 46%. That's the disastrous cost of fighting a war. What we need to do is pay the premium to deter future aggression.
Wow.
And I reckon that's around about 3% at least.
They are astonishing. I know figures I hadn't heard before, astonishing figures. Can I, just before I let you go, I'm going to come to the spending point with Mark Francois himself and the sort of political side of that in a moment. But one thing that I find really alarming is that we have outsourced, some years back, army recruitment to a firm called Capita. Quite why the armed forces aren't considered capable of doing this themselves is completely beyond me. And it is astonishing, Lord Dannatt, that people who apply, in many cases, are being kept on waiting lists for up to 6 months, and that 3 out of 4 of those that apply withdraw before the end of the process, many of them utterly disenchanted with the way that it's doing. Is it not time to sack Capita and to bring army recruitment back within the British Army?
Short answer to that is yes. When we handle our own recruiting with recruiting officers in most high streets in most towns, we could attract people in. They could talk to a serving soldier, airman, sailor or marine, and within a short period of time, they were in their basic training. We chose to go away from that after the 2010, disastrous 2010 a defence review because it was thought to be cheaper to outsource recruiting at a time when we were reducing our number of troops, so it didn't really matter. But actually, it matters an awful lot. And so many young people I've come across, and their parents come across to me as well, say, he's given up waiting, she's given up waiting.
Yeah, terrible.
We need to get back to the old system, a recruiting sergeant in the high street, get them in, get them on, and take advantage, sensible national advantage, of these young people's enthusiasm.
Exactly. Lord Dannatt, thank you. That was a very clear answer, and I'm sure the right one. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
indeed.
Nigel.
Thank you. Well, I'm joined in the studio by Mark Francois, former Minister of State for the Armed Forces and Conservative Member of Parliament for Rayleigh and Wickford. And, of course, it was your question, in the Defence Committee that got that answer. James Heapy, who'd been the Armed Forces Minister for some time, has resigned, has walked away. We're told one of the reasons is he's dissatisfied that defence wasn't even mentioned in the budget. Mark, what on earth is going on?
Well, firstly, very quickly, can I just absolutely agree with Lord Dannatt about crapiter, as we affectionately know them, on the Defence Committee. Outsourcing army recruitment.
We are before the watershed and we don't use that sort of language.
I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
Capita. Outsourcing army recruitment, as the general implied, has proven to be...
Who did that?
It was, I'm afraid to say, a Conservative government. But it's proven to be the mother of all false economies.
Yeah.
And what we should do, and this came up at the committee yesterday, the Secretary of State himself has described the situation as ludicrous. So we then said, so what are you going to do about it? So, if he follows his own logic, he should sack them tomorrow. Take it back in-house and let the army go back to doing what they were always good at in the first place. I entirely concur with the General. And by the way, he's just written a very good book called Victory into Defeat, all about the parallels between the 1920s and the 1930s and the situation we have today.
Yeah, Capita themselves say they're trying to speed things up, which I'm sure will encourage both.
Well, good, but it's like waiting for Godot. But yes, OK.
Really important question, Mark. We've got a Conservative government not talking about defence, really hardly at all unless pressed. We've got a Labour Party not saying very much on defence. Given the situation the world's in, given how important this is, how does this become a general election issue? Well,
Philip Hammond, who was once a Defence Secretary that I served under, and let's just leave it there, once famously said there are no votes in defence.
I remember.
Well, at that time, China wasn't actually threatening Taiwan. Vladimir Putin hadn't invaded Ukraine. We didn't have Houthis firing missiles at British shipping in the Red Sea. Well, there are votes in defence now, all right. And I've always believed, I'm the son of a D-Day veteran, the first duty of government above all others is the defence of the realm. This must be an election issue, and I believe there would be popular support to increase defence spending. You've heard of a thing called Conservative Home. It's the Tory party's sort of fanzine website. Yeah. They did a poll. They have a standing panel of members, 3/4 of whom a couple of weeks ago said they would rather see more money spent on defence than cut taxes. And this is a Conservative Party kind of internal poll. So look, here's a report ready for war, done by the Defence Committee. We spent nearly a year doing it. We're an all-party committee. Of the 11 of us, 6 are former MOD ministers. Others have served in the armed forces. So we know that of which we speak. That's where this thing about we couldn't last more than 2 months come from. It's all documented. It's nothing that the Russians or the Chinese don't already know.
Keep shouting about it. It's an important issue, and it must be there debated during the general election.
Thank you.